when I first started carrying, I didn't know how to create a safe space for me to have that conversation with my daughters, because I never had that safe space created for me. So my youngest, she went to hug me one day, and that's when she felt it on my side. She felt my firearm on the side, and it was kind of like a recoil. There was a recoil, like, whoa, what is that? And then I told her, so we had the conversation about me carrying, why I carry, and so forth. So she seemed to be more open to it, as far as me having a firearm. However, what I did not know was 2 years prior, when she was 8 years old, she had actually fired a 22 rifle at summer camp. So she never let me know. Her mom didn't know. She never really talked about it. There wasn't any waivers or anything like that sent home, or generally something like that. They send information on, hey, there will be this or may include X, Y, Z. But there was a recoil because I had a handgun. The question I have, and this is something that, as it relates to the Black community, is there a stigma as it relates to having a handgun versus a long gun or rifle? Is one perceived differently than the other? Because with my daughter, like I said, there was a recoil that I had on me, but 2 years prior, she had fired a 22 rifle, and I was like, I loved it. It was fun. Is there a perception between the two, and is one viewed in the more negative light than the other? Let me start with Stephanie. I'll go with Colin, Chad, and Q. So Stephanie, your thoughts?
Um, I think that there's a misconception about both. Um, you start adding stuff to your rifle and it starts getting big, bad, and scary.
Mm.
Um, I just stand firmly on the fact that it's all about the miseducation and the lack of education that has been given to our people. So um, I haven't personally had to encounter that, um, but I hear about it and I see it. But to me, one is no different than the other.
Okay. I think it was Colin that was up next. Colin,
Yeah.
have you sensed or felt or seen a perception one versus the other?
Well, I see it in our community. I think that most people in our community see handguns more than
Mm.
they do rifles. So, especially when they come to the chapter, they're new to our organization. You know, they don't really understand the rifle and its purpose. So once they're educated on how rifles function, what their utility is, um, the multiple points of contact that you have with a rifle, and the more accuracy you can get out of that platform, and the distance it creates and options, then it's like, oh, I got to get an AR. I've got to get a rifle. So it's just like Stephanie said, it's more about the education process. If we fear things we don't understand, right?
Yes.
When we understand it, it takes the fear away. So I think that's part of our responsibility in our organization is to demystify, take the fear away, put some context towards the tools that we're learning and the platforms that we're learning, and we'll change that perception. But the media is horrible because they show you they show you the rifle, the long gun rifle, is typically hunting and sports shooting, but they never show you the AR used for sports shooting.
Mm.
So the media does a poor job of representing these tools.
Gotcha. Yeah, and to your point, I do think that the media and social media, because now
Yeah.
everybody's got a clip of something, and in the some instances it can be taken out of context, but it does shape a perception or create a narrative around certain types of firearms. Chad, your thoughts? Have you noticed a perception one versus the other?
Yeah, there is, and it's kind of an expansion of what Colin said. But I do want to take a slightly different approach. So obviously, with long guns, you think more so of home defense and hunting, right? But for Black folks, especially in urban communities, there's a lot of trauma around handguns,
Yes.
right? And I don't think that we pay the due respect that we should towards the experiences that our brothers and sisters may have had with a handgun, be it the loss of a friend or a family member or being near death themselves, with someone who was uneducated and malicious with a handgun. So naturally, when you have experiences, either directly or by proxy, with the handgun that are negative, obviously you're going to have a negative disposition towards a handgun than you would with a rifle or a type of a shotgun, right? So I think one of the ways that we can kind of deal with um, those stereotypes of Black people with guns, or particularly Black people with handguns, is to really get to some of that root cause, which some of that, outside of the overarching socioeconomic, political, educational stuff, is dealing with the unresolved trauma that people have relative to firearms. And I think that we've been socialized and socially conditioned, both via media, politics, and experience, to shun away from handguns as compared to rifles, right? Like, you'll listen to Black radio and you'll hear Black radio stations talk about, no one's talking about taking a shotgun away, but we want to get rid of the handguns. Well, when you're talking about taking one away, you're really talking about taking all of them away, right? And so I think that when we create the disconnect between different types of guns, I think it's important to understand why there is that disconnect. And then once you understand why there's a disconnect, I think you can begin dealing with what that disconnect is, and kind of coalescing and rejoining just talking about a gun is a gun. How you use it is going to be based on the purpose that you have for it, right? But I do think that there has to be some accounting for the unresolved and underlying trauma that a lot of people face that may turn them towards violence, or may turn them away from firearms because of something that they may have experienced.
And you know what? That we can do a whole other segment on inner city trauma as it relates to violence, and kind of what that unresolved, how it impacts inner city individuals as it continues to go unresolved and becomes a cyclical issue, a generational issue within urban communities. That's a whole nother piece, but I'm glad that you touched on that.
And it's important to realize that even when you talk about those things, right, understand that none of the things that I talked about were a result or a fault, so to speak, of a piece of metal or plastic. It's not the fault, or the genesis of that trauma is not necessarily the firearm itself, but I think that the firearm can be a representation of that trauma. And so if we want to really unpack that a little bit more, and I know we don't have the time for it right now, the expression of trauma may be a firearm, but what is that expression an expression of, right? And that's really what we kind of need to get to the root of, and deal with it on that level.
Absolutely. And just real quick, Quincy, I'm going to come to you, kind of wrapping up the last part of that question. But Timothy Ballinger, he says his thoughts are the city environment. Black communities usually uses more handguns in the suburbs, or in the South, it's more rifles. I don't know statistically how true that is, but I do know that as it relates to the city environment the urban environment that I've been exposed to, yes, it is more use of handguns. So to your point, that's been my experience as well. Quincy, kind of wrapping up the last bit.
I'll sum it up real quick. I mean, everybody else touched on it. So I remember we had one of our gun club meetings, and we introduced an AR-15 because we wanted to educate our members on the AR-15. A lot of our members never even seen one, touched one, or I mean, they just saw what the media talked about. So my former firearm safety director for our club, he brought one of his AR-15s. He brought it in and we broke it down, and we kind of debunked with a lot of what the media was saying. So we took the firearm apart. We had a whole PowerPoint presentation, told what the function was. We spent 2 hours just talking, discussing the AR-15, and because like you said, I mean, a lot of us and a lot of the members in our gun club are more handguns. And the funny thing about it is now is we are the new president of the 761st Gun Club is teaching classes on building AR-15s now. So he's doing a fantastic job. So we got members who are purchasing AR-15s right now and actually building their own. So I think that was a success because we kind of broke those barriers, broke those fears, broke those lies that the media was telling about this firearm. So and that's the point of NAGA. That's the point of all our gun clubs that we're doing. We're trying to break down what the media and society is saying to us and the Black community about firearms, the Second Amendment, and gun ownership, and we're trying to debunk those theories, those myths, those lies.